All right, we are live. Hi, Simon. How are you?
Hey, Paula, I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Yeah, doing great. Very excited about this first, webinar of the year.
Yeah, kicking off 2023 in style with one of our favorite topics. Yeah, it was weird the other day when we were recording our latest Talaera Talks episode. It was like actually kind of looking back and seeing how far we've come over the past couple of years has just been really amazing. And as well with these webinars, right? So if this is your first time joining today to a Talaera webinar, welcome. If you're coming back and you've joined before, then we're glad to see you. Today, we'll be talking about small talk across cultures, but of course, we have so many different topics, and throughout this whole year we'll be doing free monthly webinars. And yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Paula, but for me this is kind of one of those topics that I hear a lot about from a lot of different students.
Yeah, it's a very common one because, even though small talk doesn't convey so much information on itself, like it doesn't convey so many ideas, it is a great way to bond with other cultures or to prevent you from doing that. Because we've also seen teams from different cultures kind of like crash in a way, like clash, because they didn't understand each other. Like one thought, oh, this was too rough, or the other person said, oh yeah, they just wanted to know too much about my personal life and they were asking me personal questions. So there are a lot of questions around this topic, and I'm excited. I'm very excited. For those of you in the chat, I see that we have people from California, the United States, Israel, Russia, the UK, Scotland, Spain. I'm also in Spain, in Valencia. So, Kata, great to have you here. South Africa, Israel. This is always super exciting. Having people from all around, and
Yeah,
yeah.
how we approach this subject is probably really influenced by our cultural upbringing, and one of the big things I hear a lot when we are talking with our students is we're trying to develop trust across cultures with our clients, with our team, with our manager, whoever. And now as we're working more and more cross culturally, this is where it all starts, right? Is that first interaction, those first few interactions where you're trying to build trust, right? And so this is where it starts. And hopefully today you'll be able to take away some really clear, actionable insights into what we'll be doing. So let's first, really quick, if you're new and this is your first time joining, my name's Simon. I'm the People and Culture Manager with Talaera, and Paula, our Marketing and Content Director, who has done so much work in this presentation as well. So if you're wondering who makes all the amazing, webinars and everything like that, that is our very own Paula. As well, if people are interested in kind of learning more about Talaera, figuring out any of our upcoming events, things like that, where should they go, Paula?
Yeah, so I see we just launched a poll, by the way. I didn't tell you, it was like a secret poll that I launched asking people if this was their first webinar, if they had been there. We have 41% of people had been here before, so welcome back. I'm so happy that I want to think that was because the previous one was okay, at least. So I'm happy to have you back. But for
Just keep watching us.
true. And then for almost 60%, so 59% of people, this was their first time. So we are Talaera, and what we do is we provide business English and culture communication to non-native English professionals. And we touch on topics such as effective business emails, impactful presentations, preparing for a big meeting, accent pronunciation. And we do that the way that works best for our customers. Sometimes it works to do one-on-one sessions. They're very effective, but some other organizations may need something more scalable. So we offer groups, workshops, webinars. We now also have self-study, which is an amazing platform that we just released where you get to learn on your own with great content, activities, videos. So, that's a bit who we are. And then, you can always go on talaera.com, reach out at hello@talaera.com, whether you're looking to improve your own communication skills, or I know sometimes or many times we have here learning and development professionals who are looking for additional great content for their team. So we'll send a follow-up email after this webinar with additional materials and a recap of everything. I saw that someone asked before if we're sharing the recording. We're not sharing the recording. The idea that is that this is almost like a workshop where you get to interact and talk, and that's the value of it. We read you and we get back to you, but we will share a lot of resources later, so you still get all the tips and everything. So yeah, what else, Simon? Are we ready to get started?
I think we're ready. So today's agenda, we're talking about how much culture influences so many of the things we do. I mean, we also have a webinar where we talk about leading across cultures, and that's really a great one for managers, which we work a lot with managers in that kind of navigating that cross-cultural challenge. But when it comes to small talk, this can be throughout any aspect of the organization, right? I mean, because ultimately we're talking about establishing trust with another person, right? But here we're going to kind of be building through today on first talking about across cultures and how that culture influences how we approach small talk. We'll be talking about how to actually take that first step in engaging in the small talk. I know that's a really tough part for a lot of people, of like, where do I even start, right? How do I introduce myself? We'll be talking about that. And then as well, how do we overcome that awkward silence part where we're like, okay, when do we press go on the meeting, right? Or when do we take that next step? We have some really great strategies here. And again, if you're watching this and thinking, there's a kind of a science to small talk that I've never really thought about, then that's exactly right. I mean, we have so many people that say, I feel comfortable speaking English, but striking that conversation, getting through those first 5 minutes is really difficult. And that's where we're today hoping you'll walk away and feeling comfortable from this. So let's start with talking about this huge impact of culture, right? And how this defines how we approach small talk. I love this here. Like, small talk is responsible for a huge part of our everyday speech. I mean, I think about myself and how big a part small talk comes when I'm trying to develop a relationship with a colleague, or when I'm trying to get to know a potential client, or definitely for us students. Small talk is a huge part of this. For me, it's kind of always felt a little bit natural. I don't know, Paula, for you, has small talk always been a kind of a natural skill for you?
Not that much. It's been, I was very much of an introvert when I was a bit younger. So small talk has always been very painful to me. And I kind of had to figure out, from a research perspective, what makes small talk what it is, and how can I sound more natural and not just feel like I'm dying inside, So a lot of research that I did for my personal benefit that we've reflected on today's webinar. So I hope people also get a bit out of it. But, it's funny that when we do small talk, we'll talk about what it is, but you're not conveying heavy stuff. You're not conveying in-depth knowledge. And yet that's what we do nearly a third of the time we're speaking. So there must be something about it that makes it special.
Right. And talking about that, right? Like, let's define this, right? What is small talk? I'd love to kind of see, what people think small talk, which emoji represents small talk to you. I mean, for me, while people are kind of throwing in emojis here in the chat, I want to see what everybody says. But when we talk about small talk, like what that actually means, right? How would we define small talk, Paula?
Yeah, so small talk is this general conversation, small questions, very general chat that we do at the beginning of a conversation, where the goal is not to convey so many ideas, but about finding some common ground, about very general things that makes us human, and that could be the weather, or that could be our background, or how we're feeling, or how our weekend was. Those are very common themes about small talk. I see that people are reacting with a lot of different emojis. That's funny. Mine would be, let me see if I can find it. I see very positive ones in general. That is awesome.
Okay, good, good. Most of the time, I would assume that it's like, the one where he's like sweating or, like nervous or what have you. I don't know. Which one is yours, Paula?
Yes, mine would be I just sent it in the chat, is the one where you're sweaty and worried and
Yeah.
not that much anymore, but I felt like that.
But again, it kind of proves the point a little bit around like everybody has their own emotion of what they're bringing to this. For context, I was just recently at an HR conference, and it is one of these kind of mingle things, connecting, networking type of deals. And you know, I don't care who you are, like there has to be some level for you that you feel like, oh, like this is a lot of work. And I did feel afterwards, I felt exhausted, right? Because I was using a lot of these strategies that we'll talk about today. And even though it went well, I met a lot of great people, I was really tired afterwards because there is this emotion built up in that, right? Where you're trying to build trust with people. So when we're talking about initial tips, just really quick, right off the bat, Paula, what can we do to kind of navigate this, surviving this small talk challenge?
Yeah, so one of the goals, as we said before, is to find some sort of common ground. So whenever possible, perhaps you're having a call with a potential client, or you're going to an event, as you said before, you went to an HR event, do your research as much as possible. Don't take it too far so that you're stalking people, but see what kind of attendees will be there, their
Right.
location, find some stats, some news. If you are traveling to a specific place, then know a little bit about where you're going. That would be my first tip.
Yeah, it's always great to kind of rely back on a question that you can ask about, if you're traveling to a different country, about the culture there, about about the event itself. But I love this second point that you have around mimicking people, right? Like, what does that mean? Like, am I trying to verbatim say what you're saying, or what is that about?
So this is when you mimic the other person, is when you mirror them, is when you do something similar to what they do, like with body posture. If they're open, try to also be open. If they tilt their head, then try to do that as well, because it shows that you're listening. If they use some specific words, try to use them back. It's not about repeating everything, but some sort of mimicking or mirroring makes them feel as we're in this together.
Yeah.
And it builds that rapport. I just read in the chat, it's a good way to practicing active listening. Active listening, 100%, always. That is a
Great.
great.
All right. Yeah. Gold star. Very good.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. With active listening, showing that you're actually paying attention, right? Most people are just waiting for their turn to talk in a conversation, right? But actually, we use a lot, or we talk about the Rasa technique of repeating and bringing back that what they're bringing into the conversation and showing that you're actually, using it as a two-way street, right? Asking open-ended questions. Here with silence, this is an interesting one, right? So not all silences are bad. If you're coming from the United States, at least for myself, growing up, like a silence in a conversation was like death. I mean, it was 1 second of silence is like 10 minutes. Why is, silence not necessarily a bad thing?
It's not necessarily a bad thing, because some cultures need more time to get back. In cultures such as many places or areas in the United States, you want to keep the conversation going, right? Having silence is seen as, who, there's something wrong here, and I just need to fill the silence. But for some other cultures, it is it is polite to think about what you really want to say. That shows respect. And for that to happen, you need to give them time. So understanding that with some cultures, it is okay to keep that silence, and that they may just be taking some more time to think about a good response to you.
Yeah.
I asked in the chat, Simon, if people find silence uncomfortable or okay. I would love to hear what people say. For me, it's okay. I'm fine with silence, but then, you
Yeah.
know, it might be a cultural thing. Deborah says, depends on who you are with. Some are very uncomfortable, others not. That's very true. In the US, knowing about regional sports teams, college basketball, football, their interests. So that's about topics. That is amazing. That is great. Asking more in general and speaking less is a
Mhm.
great tip. Um, you know, remember and use names. That is probably the golden bit of communication. We love hearing our name.
Yeah.
So
It can be difficult though. I'm one of those where I'll meet you and then your name goes in one ear and out the other. So I've had to really try to use different techniques to remember names. But yeah, no, I agree that it is really it matters when someone says your name. You feel that immediately. And then we'll talk about this a little bit later. But yeah, the wrap up, right? Like how do we transition out of small talk if we are trying to build towards a business relationship or towards the next topic? How do we kind of make that transition? And we'll be talking about that. Okay, so we have an example here, and I want people to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down in the chat if you think this is, would we consider this good small talk, right? I'm meeting Alex and Alex asked me how I'm doing today, and I just respond with good.
mhm.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the time to hop on a call and review our product. Let's keep it moving. Okay, you're welcome. Yeah. Okay, so immediately, my little sister, she's Gen Z, and she says anything with just a period is like means aggression, and so we should watch away with that. So already off the bat, we have some signs here that maybe this isn't the best, right? So what do you think? A thumbs up or thumbs down? What's going on in the chat there?
A lot of thumbs down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is a bit awkward, or awk, as my little sister would say. I'm just gonna start throwing out Gen Z all day today, so just get ready. Now, what can we do better, right? We talked a little bit about asking open-ended questions and that kind of mirroring, right? So let's kind of give a secondary option here. Now, what is happening differently here, right? So same Alex on the left hand side is bringing about the same part, but the part on the right hand side is a little bit different. Paula, what would you say is the kind of the theme here that's helping this conversation, this small talk move along?
Yeah, so we're sharing the recipe for small talk in a bit. This is just a bit of an introduction to see what looked like to make it awkward and what looks like to make it like a fluent, like a seamless conversation. So here we have Alex is asking the same question, yeah, like how are you doing today? But then we have Alex replying, well, I'm doing well, thanks. The sun's shining here in Poland, so I can't complain. How about yourself, right? So you're asking them back, nice, doing well also. You see? And if we look at the answers from Alex, the blue ones, we see that they all end in a full question. It's not
Right.
a period, as you said. It's not, it can be awkward not only for Gen Z, but for everyone else. So we just end with like, I'm good, and
Yeah.
that's it. You always have to ask back. So those are the absolute basics. We'll share the recipe, as we call it, for small talk, but this one is much better. I see some thumbs up also in the chat.
Great, great. Now, when we're talking about this, right? So we're really quickly kind of throwing out some examples of good and bad. And of course, just like anything, it's a skill, something that we work on. But there is the reality of culture influencing this. Now, if you look on the left-hand side here, we're looking at one of the legendary visuals when we're talking about cultural cross-cultural communication, the iceberg example of what you can see on top versus what you cannot see underneath, right? And I think this plays a big part in how we approach small talk, because so many of these customs and attitudes and values, are often things that you have to uncover, right? They're often things that, you have to dig a little bit below the surface. But the challenge is, okay, how do we get below the surface, right? How do we actually get down there to find those things out? And that's where small talk plays a big part. But we have to kind of navigate these parts in the front. Some quick resources, we're a big fan of Erin Meyer and her work with the culture map. If you're familiar, definitely check it out. But this plays a role, right? And often you'll hear this kind of back and forth between peach cultures and coconut cultures. Paula, what are these, and how do they influence the way that we're approaching people, we're approaching situations?
Yeah, so a very superficial assumption when we looked at the iceberg before, one of the things that is below the surface is our own assumptions and biases and prejudices. And sometimes we think, oh, this culture is fake. They just seem fake. They're very superficial. And sometimes we think, oh, they're very harsh and cold. And, more than just living it there and just thinking that they're either fake or harsh, we need to understand that cultures have different communication styles and relationship styles. And this is a great analogy by Fons Trumpnars and Charles Hampton Turner. We have it down there, where they compare, peach cultures versus coconut cultures. Peach cultures are very friendly. They're smiling all the time at first, even at strangers, which it can be very odd for some people. They may use your first name, they share, they ask, so it's all soft on the outside, but then you get to the hard pit, and getting to be their true friend is really, really hard. Like there's the last bit, and we have cultures like the United States and Japan. Again, these are generalizations. It doesn't mean that everyone from Japan is going to be a peach, or everyone from the United States is going to be so, but it is, these are general themes that we see that help us understand how people communicate. And then we have coconut cultures, right? Like Germany and Russia, where they might seem initially closed off. They may not smile at strangers. They don't ask personal questions at first. And they just take longer to build relationships. But once you crack that hard crust, then you get to the soft and sweet part where they become loyal friends or loyal customers or partners for a long time. So there's not right and wrong way to be. It's just different. And the better we understand this, then the easier it will be to make small talk and relationships, personal and professional.
Yeah.
Simon, do you see yourself more of a peach culture or a coconut culture?
Yeah, I think, you made a great point here about, them being generalizations, and it's not a rule, right? So I think the first thing that we should really talk about when we're talking about cross-cultural communication is that there is not a hard and fast rule or some kind of chart where you plot yourself and then you think, okay, I need to follow this formula when I communicate with these people because I'm this and they're that. That's going about it all the wrong way. The point of this activity is considering that there are differences and that they are, like Paula said, not right or wrong. There just are differences. And that's okay. Now we can go into those differences and we can work with them and we can navigate them and we can build trust, whereas I'm from, Florida in the United States, where it's just very much a peach culture, right? And then I moved to Copenhagen, Denmark, which is very much a coconut culture. And it's definitely been an adjustment, but at the same time, you learn to start to observe these key points and really start to appreciate them for what they are, right? It's not right or wrong, it's just different. And so here I think this is a great point, right? Like, peach or coconut, I mean, what would you consider? Again, this is generalizations, but if we look on the left hand side, friendliness, answer small talk questions in a general way. We're avoiding the in-depth answers. Don't think they're necessarily fake or superficial. It's just their communication style. And, don't be surprised if they smile at strangers. Now, I'm going to give a little clue here. When I first moved to Denmark, I was in the horrific habit of like smiling at people on the sidewalk and saying like, hey, how's it going? And literally saying, how's it going to, stone-faced Danes walking the other way, and people maybe thought that something was wrong with me. So to kind of give you a clue, what would you say, Paula?
That sounds a bit like a peach.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's going to be on A, right? And then the other side, when we're talking about B, right, it may be some more time to open up, right? That relationship building process is going to be a little bit longer, but might ultimately be more in depth, right? It might be, yeah, a little bit deeper. And this is kind of yeah, like we said, not a hard and fast rule, but a good first step when we're talking about these differences. Paula, anything you want to add here with peach and coconut?
Let's leave it there for now.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, there's so much more when we talk about this. And I love this part here, right? Like, how long should small talk last, right? So we're going from the differences in how we develop, relationships, how we develop trust, to now actually getting into that small talk point. And we can take the clues that we learned about in the previous points here onto this question here. Paula, what do you think as we look through these? Switzerland, Finland, you think it's longer or shorter in these types of countries?
I know. I'd be super curious to hear what people think. If you have any personal experience with these cultures, let us know where you feel like. I think in Ireland it usually takes, I don't know, 3 hours to do small talk. Too accurate. Or like in Egypt or in Poland, in Mexico, Colombia. What do you think? Here we
Yeah.
see short, but in terms of minutes, do you think there's a big difference between these cultures? Almost non-existent in Finland. Finland, 1 second talk. I love that.
1 second. That's a good one. Wow, very close.
Latin America, hours.
Okay, all right, good. So people are on track here.
Yes, they are. Poland, 3 5 minutes. Ooh. Longer in Ireland and Mexico. In Ireland, small talk can take most of the day. Interesting. Mina, no small talk. Mina might be too long. So we have Egypt,
Okay.
3 hours. I love all these answers. Let's look at what research says here. And then someone made a very good point, Kata. She said 2 minutes in the office, 1 hour in the pub. This is it's
Good
a big
point.
difference from business culture and your personal life. The research we did here was on, in the professional context. So you were totally right. Finland, almost no small talk. Switzerland as well. Ireland, about 5 minutes at the office, but it's true that the MENA countries take hours or can take hours and hours, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I lived in Riyadh for a little while, and I had to very quickly learn that how rude I was initially to just start asking questions and to say, all right, let's get to the point here, and how I actually learned very quickly to, okay, we need to slow it down and we need to take time to ask about each other's lives, family. We want to know about, interests, and build that relationship, because, like we said, no right and wrong. It's just, how do you expect us to do business if we don't have a personal relationship, right? And stepping into that, it's a different experience, but it is just different, right? Not right or wrong. So again, something to consider. Now, some of the tools that we have here, maybe you won't be able to use those consecutively for hours and hours, but the idea is, right, it's going to last you at least through the first, 20, 30 minutes, which is mostly what you would do. And the topics that we should initially avoid, we have to be a little bit sensitive, right, cross-culturally. Paolo, what would you say with what we should avoid when it comes to topics?
Yeah, so topics are also very culture dependent. This is just a safe framework that you can follow. Okay, topics are the weather, entertainment, sports, location, projects, traveling, hobbies, everything that people feel usually okay talking about, but then avoid religion, money, gossip, weight, speaking ill of others, politics. Those can be very, very tricky. So it's just best to avoid them altogether.
Yeah.
Uh, don't
Now, I have lived in some countries where one of the first questions was, how much money do you make? And right. So for me, that was very much like, whoa, okay, I realized that was a cultural aspect, right? It wasn't necessarily trying to be rude, but when these things pop up, they may pop up, right?
Yeah, and it's also like, small talk rules that they're very different across cultures, and one of the reasons is their own culture. For example, the weather is a very common topic in the UK, and that is because it's very unpredictable. Here in Spain, we don't talk, or in Valencia, we don't talk so much about the weather because it's always the same. It's always sunny, sometimes a little cold, yes, but what are we going to talk about, so there is a lot of like situational context that has to do with what kind of conversations you may have during small talk.
Yeah, yeah. But we tend to want to, yeah, just avoid some of the dinner table conversations, as my mom would call them, right? We want to kind of move away from those when we're going across cultures. Yeah. Now this is a great example, and I love this. When we're approaching these cross culturally, there may even be some differences in how we take that first step, right?
Yes, and I want to ask people why they think we created this Venn diagram between how are you doing and did you eat today? They seem to be very different questions, but somehow they overlap. Can people guess? Can you guess, or do you know what they actually have in common when we talk about small talk? I found this super interesting. I lived in Vietnam, same as you, right? I lived there for a few years, and I got that question asked very often. Did you eat today? I had never been asked that question before in my life, so I thought, why are people asking me if I ate today? Am I too thin or too fat? Like, does that have to do with how I look, or you know? Um, they mean, when we're doing small talk, they can mean the same, and it just means hi,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In the United States, if you go to New York and people ask you how you doing, they don't want to know how you're doing. They're just saying hi.
Right.
And if you go to some Asian cultures like China, I know it happens in China, and in Vietnam it happened as well. They ask you, did you eat today? And it's just their way of saying, hey, how you doing?
Yeah, just hi, and that's that first signal, right, to establish some sort of opening for trust building, right? And that's, yeah, I think it's a great difference, right? The focus on food in these countries versus just the how are you doing, right? And I think, yeah, I think it's fascinating. I got that question a lot and had to learn that very quickly as well. Another was, do you feel okay? Or you look a little bit tired, and that wasn't, a lot of people that I work with took offense to that, but that wasn't coming from a place of you actually look tired, you don't look good. It was coming from a place of, oh, like, you're a dear colleague of mine and I care about you. I want to make sure you're okay, right? And that was just like a common, yeah, entry point. So definitely checking it out. So what are some other ways of saying, how are you? Like, what would you consider? It doesn't have to be as extreme as did you eat today, right? But what do you think? I mean, are there any other ways of approaching that kind of that first step of small talk?
Yeah, many. And the reason we added this question here is, I know we have a lot of native English speakers here with us, but we did a quick research, like a quick poll on, what questions do you have about small talk? We tried to include them all. And one of the questions we got is, what else can I say, right? Especially this is for our non-native English speakers. Instead of how are you? I'm fine, or I'm fine, thank you. What else can we add here? And we have, are you well? All good. How do you do? How's your day going? Those are all great. I
Yeah.
love. How about for I'm fine? What would you usually answer to how are you, Simon?
I usually don't say I'm fine. I usually think, yeah, I'm doing well. And then my small talk brain kicks in, and then I just start maybe oversharing more than most people would expect. But yeah, usually if I'm asking, I like, yeah, how's your day going? Or how's your week been? And mostly for me, just because I find those questions to be a little bit more interesting. If someone will tell me, oh, their week's been going great, okay, awesome, tell me a little bit about it. Or yeah, their days, yeah, not so well, got a few things going on. What about you, Paulo? Which do you use?
Um, Usually, how's it going? How have you been? How's your week? Those are the most common ones that I use.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we'll send this to everyone so you have access for some of these phrases here. But yes, you definitely have a lot of different options here when asking and replying. But again, the goal here when we're doing this is to get from point A to point B, right, in the conversation. And we don't want to just end it, right? We want to keep it going. And we'll be talking a little bit about that. So really quick, some cultural differences and the questions that we ask. What would you say about this, Paula? Like, I mean, you have to kind of be a little bit careful with this, right?
Yes, and they are answered in a very different way based on where you are. For example, how are you? When, as I said, I visited New York earlier this year, and it was in a way very shocking how little they care about how you're doing when they ask how are you. I'm not saying they don't care about you, but that's
Yeah.
not what they want to know when they say, hey, how you doing? Hey, how are you? But if you go to Germany, or if you ask that to a German person, and this is based on personal experience as well, I lived in Germany for a few years. How are you is often answered in depth, and they really tell you about their day and how they're doing. And if it's an American person asking a German, it can be a little bit puzzling because you're like, why are they answering? Like, why are they telling me this? And I'm like, well, you asked me. So it can be a little tricky. What do you do for a living is something that I've also heard in many countries, but can be offensive in others. If you don't feel confident or comfortable answering that question, what would you say, Simon? Would you tell people to answer anyway, or to, close off?
Yeah, I mean, if someone asks you, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" Because that's very common in the US to ask, "Oh, what do you do?" Like that's a very common question
Friends.
to ask. Yeah, if that seems a little off-putting, you can just mention industry if you don't want to get into the specific into the specific one. Oh, yeah, I work in logistics, and then, keep it like that. You might sound a little bit like a spy, but that's okay. You can just kind of steer the conversation the other way. That's fine. The did you eat today, right? Like that's kind of very specific to culture. When we're talking about, yeah, children and how much you earn, right? Those can be really difficult because we typically, at least in the United States, and a lot of places in Europe, you wouldn't just immediately start asking, how much money you make. That was really difficult for me the first time someone asked me that. I really kind of froze up. Have you been in that situation, Paula? What did you do to kind of navigate that?
Um, so when this happened to me, it happened to me a very long time ago in Vietnam. Actually, my neighbor next door was from India. They had a beautiful family. We became friends eventually. But one of the times they invited me to their house to like have some food, and um that was one of the first questions they asked me, and I also froze. I didn't know what to do, so I didn't have an answer at that point. I'm like, yeah, in my culture that's not something we share, and I didn't really know how to react, and I found it a little uncomfortable at the time.
Yeah, yeah, and again, that's something that you can navigate. Most people will probably be able to tell if you're uncomfortable about it, but very often we can give the benefit of the doubt that this is a cultural, a cultural aspect. Um, what's your wife's name? That's, yeah, again, something where wanting to know about your family. Oh, how old are your children? Again, that can be something that I think in most places you're pretty safe with, talking about family. But yeah, the how much do you earn one, that can go right to the right to the edge. Okay, so we've talked about the cultural influence, right? And the biggest point I think to take away from that section is that we should just be aware that there are the differences, right? It's not about being right or being wrong. It's just about being aware that there are differences, but ultimately, most people engage in small talk for the same reason that you and I do, which is to establish that relationship, right? So we know that now when we're engaging in small talk, we're taking that first step, right? I love this, Paula, that you added here, right? Like how we socialize at work. Yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, just hide, right? But I'm such, I'm so guilty of this, like asking about their weekends on Monday and Friday is just always my kind of go-to. And this can even be with someone that, I'm just learning, a new client, a new student, yeah, asking about their weekend plans, what have you. And that's always something to consider as a good kind of, yeah, a good way to do it. But we're talking about the recipe, and Paula, I want you to break this one down for everybody listening. What is our 1, 2, 3 step of navigating this and kind of jumping into that small talk situation? Let's say it's someone that you have not met before. How are we navigating this?
Yes. So as you said at the beginning, we've had a lot of learners, so communication learners that struggled with small talk, and I've struggled with small talk as well. And so we really tried to crack what makes small talk small talk. Like, how can you keep the conversation going? What makes it a seamless conversation? And we saw that people who are comfortable in small talk do this three step or follow this 3-step recipe. And the first one is answer with a short sentence. Like just briefly what they asked. So you just reply with a short sentence, then briefly add one small detail. So for example, hey, how's the weather where you are? Oh yeah, it's very sunny. And then briefly add one small detail. But I heard in the news that it's going to get a little rainy tomorrow. And then end with a full question instead of and you, or instead of no question at all, try to answer a full question back. How is the weather where you are? So these
Yeah.
3 steps, they're very simple, but if you ever struggle with small talk, especially in English, if it's not your first language, this is a super easy thing to follow that will really make your life much easier. It's worked for me.
Yeah, and same. And I think we should really key in on the number 2 and number 3 here. Adding the one small detail is it's very important, because actually what you're doing is you're giving like a lifeline to this person to add on to that detail, right? Like they'll ask more about that detail. You're giving them a kind of a clue or a hint or what have you to ask you a little bit more about that detail. And then asking back with a full question is critical to keep it going, right? You want to think about it like a game of tennis, right? So back and forth, back and forth. But with asking a full question, we want to consider what kind of question we're asking and making sure that, it's a good question. It's keeping it open to keep that, conversation flowing. So yeah, I love the 1, 2, 3 step here. I think it's great, right? So again, if we look back on that first point that we were talking about, how was your weekend? Oh, it was good, right? Versus the second option here, right? So we have the first sentence. It was nice. I got some time to relax. And then a little bit more detail. It was great to recharge the batteries before the week. How was your weekend, right? So if I'm hearing that, I could maybe even ask, oh, were you pretty, were you pretty drained after last week? Like, was it pretty exhausting? Did you have any big projects or what was it? And as well, I can ask about the beach. Oh my God, how far did you walk? Do you do that often, right? So we can kind of build on that a little bit as we go through. Another great example, right? So this might be someone that you're just meeting, right? Where are you from? Instead of just, yeah, no, I'm from Dorset. It's like, hey, all right, now you're putting the pressure on me to add more about this town in Germany that maybe I've heard of once, and I need to add in, oh, I've heard of Dorsten. Is that close to the right? So instead of putting that pressure on me, you're bringing it back with this 1, 2, 3 step. And Paula, you said you use that a lot, the 1, 2, 3.
I try to use it, yeah, especially with people I don't know so
Yeah.
well and where I may feel a little bit less confident. And this is like, okay, yeah, I got my 1, 2, 3. They're super simple, but I know that I'm safe. I'm giving them a reason to, go on and continue with that conversation. I don't know if anyone in the chat has ever used anything similar, or if you had any sort of framework in your mind. I would be curious. This one's what worked for also for some of our students. We've shared this before, and they've reported great results as well.
Yeah, yeah. And again, you can use this just with pretty much everything. It's kind of a silver bullet when it comes to small talk. But again, right, why do we have small talk? And that's ultimately to build trust, to build rapport, right? And I want to hear kind of in the chat, if you can add, right? How do you build trust and rapport? We're talking about in a business context with colleagues, with your manager, with your clients. How do you do this? Do you do it through small talk? Is it kind of, it takes a long time that you do it through a kind of a process of making sure, oh, they did their part of the project, I do my part of the project, and that's how we build trust. Because it can be different, right? And I think I want to stick here real quick. Paolo, what would you say about building trust? Is it more with kind of getting to know the person, or is it more, through our work together, you trust that I'll do something, so you trust me, as a person after that?
That's also very cultural dependent, right? Some cultures are more, they value the professionalism more, and others value the personal time you spend together and how much you get to know them in person. I guess for me it's a combination of both, and for many people it is. But we do have a few tips um, where you can actually build trust and rapport. We just got a question in the chat: is there any chance deepening small talk conversation? I would say it can happen, especially in non-professional settings. It can happen during professional settings as well.
Mhm.
Uh, but that can be very tricky across cultures, because some cultures like the United States, they value time. Like, time is money, and you really want to get down to business. So it's important to read the air and try to see, okay, yeah, if this person is actually very busy, it might not be the right time to go deep into the conversation. Versus if you're talking with cultures that do value that, the coconut cultures that do value that more in-depth conversation, it may be worth going a little bit more deep into the conversation. Would you agree with that, Simon?
Yeah, again, I think you have to read the room a little bit, right? So what is oftentimes the purpose of the meeting, or the meeting itself, will kind of be presented very clearly at the beginning. If it is, our first meeting is, a lunch meeting, or a dinner meeting, then that you can kind of get that signal that maybe this is less business, more getting into and knowing each other, right? And again, you don't have to just put yourself in that own culture. You can also invite them to lunch, invite them to dinner afterwards, and use that time to build trust your own way, right? And that would be getting to know that person like that. So read the room definitely from there. Some tips on how we can build that trust initially, right? So number one, it sounds so superficial, but it's so true, right? Like, let them talk about themselves. Why is that, Paula?
We just like to talk about ourselves. It triggers the same feeling of pleasure in our brains as we have it here, food and money. So let them talk about themselves. I see how Ines said, I always ask people how they're doing. And it sounds basic, but you do need to also hear about how they're doing and what they have to say. So I very much agree with her on
Yeah.
that. The other tip that we have is emphasize similarities. And this, I'm also going to tie this back to Dominica. She said, I try to remember details from one small talk and ask them about the things they mentioned when I see them again. I love
Mhm.
that. And if those things that you remember are also similar to you, um, use that to your advantage in a good way. Like, try to highlight, I also went to that university, or, oh, I lived in your hometown for a while. We
Yeah.
like more like us in general. Um, and then use people names. That's
Yeah.
something we talked about. It works wonders. And
Yeah. It definitely does. And if you can, don't be like me where the name goes in and out of your ear. Find a strategy to remember the name. One thing, that really works that I've used is to take that person's name and then reference it with something that you are, familiar with, or with a story, or what have you. I remembered Paula's name because when I was in college, I was a tour guide at a winery, and the lady that trained me, her name was Paula. So that's how I remembered Paula's name the first time. And I used that, right? So you can, whatever works, use it, but it's better than forgetting the name, I would say. But you don't have to be awkward and tell the person how you remember their name. That's just, you can leave that person out. Okay, so we're getting to the end here, talking about professional introductions. What's important to know when we're introducing ourselves professionally, Paula?
Yeah, so one thing is to try and leave out, and this is an introduction that we've heard in the past, not with that name, but it's a very similar introduction to something we've heard in the past. And here, Etienne speaks about her age and that she has children and where she went to university. Those are not things that we really care about in business so much. So what is it that we can do to introduce ourselves in a professional way and that makes impact? So there's two big steps. The first one is talking about who you are, and also say about, talk about your job. That's the easy part. My name is Paula and I am the marketing director at Talaera. Or let me introduce myself. I'm Anna and I am this, this, and that. You can say officially, my job is to create content here at Talaera and distribute it, make sure that it reaches our learners. So that's the first
Yeah.
step. That's easy. But then there's the show, don't tell. And this is where you're going to make an impact on people. And that is where you really try to paint a picture in their mind saying, but really, or it's all about, or which is a fancy way of saying. And here's where you just give the informal explanation that you would give your sister, right? You wouldn't tell your sister, I am the business development representative in, that sounds like very fancy. That's okay. That's for step one. But then if she asks, okay, yeah, but what do you really do? This is
Right.
the color. We have a few examples
Yeah.
on the next slide. So we have, I'm the COO, and then you can just straight ahead into which is a fancy way of saying that I make sure the company is run in the most efficient way possible. I'm sure there's many other things about being a COO, but that's like the gist of it. That's what you would tell your sister, your
And
cousin.
and I would say like that is maybe a little bit more for an informal situation than one of the other two, right? So I love this. I love, yeah, it's a fancy way of saying that I do this. I love that, right? And that would be more for maybe if you're trying to build that trust initially, trying to, it's signaling a little bit of humility that you're, aware that this is a fancy title, and that's a good way of building trust. You know, then again, right, I like the bottom example here, right? It's all about making sure that the team grows, keeps growing nicely, right? So I like that, really, that kind of adding and painting the picture. Why do you think it's important, Paula, to paint that picture for people?
It's for them to truly understand what you do, right? And we have a lot of fancy titles nowadays, and it's almost like breaking the professional barrier that we all have, or like the fence that we all have. And it's about letting them know this is truly who I am and what I do, and I'm willing to truly get to know you better.
Yeah.
So it's that little change that can really help you get to know the other person better and have them also open up to you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember doing this the first time I met my girlfriend's parents, and I was introducing myself to her dad, and he asked me, "Oh, well, what's your job?" And my girlfriend said, "Oh, he's a people and culture manager." And he just looked at me like, what is that?" Right? And so I was like, "Oh, okay, so it's all about, making sure, yeah, the team is operating and basically HR." And then he goes, "Oh, okay, okay, okay." But it is a very kind of good way to break the ice there. I like that. Okay, we're coming to the end, so we're going to talk about ending small talk, right? Getting through that awkward ending point when we kind of move on to what the meeting is about, right? So we talked a little bit about this before. How many minutes in do we switch over to, the meeting or the topic or what have you? What do you think? So we're not talking about minutes right now, but the right time, like what's the right feeling? What's the right vibe that needs to happen for you to end and move to the main point? What would you say, Paula?
For me, it's when you've asked a couple of questions and then the conversation starts to decline. So before it actually goes down, try to pick it up and then go back. All right, let's get down to business, or
Yeah.
we have a few steps where you can do that in a professional way, but it's that moment where, yeah, everything's super high pitch in the conversation and everything is going well. And then there is a point where things like you take a bit longer to ask the next question, or you may not provide that much detail. That is the time where, it's time to move on. And yeah, Angelina said, when you feel like there is less and less to share, or
Yeah.
there's an awkward pause with her.
Yeah, or there's an awkward pause, right? Yeah, exactly right. And you can almost feel that kind of like, yeah, okay, the smiles are kind of fading. Okay, let's get to it. Right? And that's, oh, there you go. So just like that, awkward pause. Paula wants to get down to business. Okay, so all right, Paula. Wow. All right, we'll get down to business. How to end small talk politely. All right, so yeah, the conversation has gone on too long. Do you need to leave? Is the presentation starting? So I love this kind of warning, transition, and reason. Just for time's sake, Paula, can you quickly kind of walk us through these 3 steps?
Absolutely. So you can give them a warning saying, I think the meeting's starting in a moment. That sounds really interesting. Or I actually have to run in a couple of minutes. And that's where you give them this warning of like, we need to finish this soon. And I'm just not going to,
Yeah.
slam the door in your face, but I'm at least letting you know. And then you have a little transition. Well, anyways, all right. Yeah. Or you can say, oh, it was great chatting with you. Or, all right, let's get started. You can pick one of these transitions. And then sometimes we can also give a reason, like, oh, I should get back to work, or I know you're busy, so I won't keep you. That's a great one as well. Do you ever use that one?
I don't. I use the all right a lot, and unfortunately I do it in a way that just is so clear. I'm just like, all right, like, so let's, and it just signals that right away, like, all right, so this thing, and it's always leading with so should we discuss, should we get into what were your thoughts, kind of, or I would do something like, all right, so I wanted to set the meeting with you so we could just have a, and then kind of get into it that way, right? But the transition is really important. So like you said, you're not just, shutting the door in someone's face, right? So yeah, so we went through all these three sections, and final tips, Paula, for people walking away on small talk, again, across cultures. What should people walk away with today?
Yeah, so in a way, let the host lead the way. If you're visiting someone, if you're in their country, then let them lead the way. Ask questions and try to keep it safe. Yes, ask a lot of questions, but try to keep them as safe as possible. If you're not sure about how to answer, you do that 1, 2, 3 recipe that we shared before, which was start with a short sentence, briefly add one small detail, and then end with a full question. And then don't forget to listen. And if you want to wrap up here, Angelina also said, I don't want to steal too much of your time. That's a great one. I don't want to keep you any longer. I know how busy you are at the moment. Those are all great ways to wrap up. And Simon, I know how busy you are, and I don't want to steal any more of your time. So what can people do if they want to keep learning, if they want to keep improving their communication skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if we have, I mean, we have so many things going on right now. Like, we don't have the time for me to go through all the things that you can do in our learning ecosystem. Like, that's what we're growing right now. And that's what we want to do with these monthly webinars. So if you have your LinkedIn profile that you want to throw into the chat and connect, please do so, right? I mean, what we're trying to do is build a learning ecosystem so people can get tips from each other and learn from each other and create this community. So yeah, throw your LinkedIn handle in there and connect. We'll be doing these every month, and there's always a ton of new people joining, which is great. And we just have more and more people, which is awesome. If you want to check out our free resources, like I said, there's the monthly webinars. We have a blog, ebooks with a bunch of great tips. We have a great DE&I guide. And then as well, the podcast that Paula and I do together. I know we have a lot of really cool things coming up this year that we're excited about. Last year, we hit our goal for the number of downloads, which was awesome. We were so happy about that. Like, we had, thousands of people from all over the world. It was amazing. And if you want to just learn about training just for yourself or for your team, let us know, hello@talaera.com. Right there, you can just, yeah, let us know. We'll be sending some tips further. That's pretty much all I had. If you want to connect with Paolo or I on LinkedIn, you can absolutely do so. Or you can just follow Talaera on LinkedIn. But yeah, this was great. I had a lot of fun. And yeah, how about you, Paula? Did you enjoy today?
I always enjoy it. It's so much fun. My favorite part is people in the chat and reading their comments. So I really, really appreciate people participating. It's been super fun, and I'm looking forward to the next one. If you ever have any suggestions about a specific topic, or if you missed a session and you would like us to do it again, let us know. hello@talaera.com. I think we added it, but hello@talaera.com is the place where you can come say hi, ask questions, reach out if you're interested for yourselves, for your team, or if you just want to say hi. I enjoyed it. We also love the feedback. So
Yeah. Come and yeah, practice your small talk with us. So yeah, we're here. And yeah, as always, we always end everything with keep learning. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
thank you, everyone. All right.
Keep learning. All right. See you. Bye bye.